Check out these performances from the multi-track master of The Doors' Light My Fire. The Latin feel of John Densmore's drum part. The innovative touch of Ray Manzarek on keyboards. The exotic scales of Robby Krieger on guitar. And the lilting Lizard King Jim Morrison on vocals.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar.
The Doors came out of nowhere with this fully realized song and performance from their debut album. For me, it created a musical category that defied labels. You know, this was an eclectic mix of jazz, rock, and pure exploration with no borders. Stick around as we go inside the Doors' 7-minute psychedelic journey, Light My Fire. So glad you're here, because it's time for us to blow up the song.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
Welcome back to the channel and blow up the song number 4. So my mission in these musical blow-ups is to take great songs and recordings and explode the veneer of the final mix to expose individual tracks and stems. So you get to hear the building blocks of these classic arrangements, performances, and recordings. Please take a moment right now to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know when new episodes come out. Okay, so far we've been holed up in England, blowing up the Beatles, the Stones, and the Who. Now it's time to cross the pond all the way to Southern California. We're going to blow up our first American band, The Doors. The Doors' debut LP was recorded in the summer of '66 at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles and released on Elektra Records early in '67. And the first single was Break On Through to the Other Side. Ironically, it failed to break through at all. There were some LA DJs like Dave Diamond of KFRC. They started getting requests for a cool Doors album cut, Light My Fire. Problem was the song clocked in at over 7 minutes. So that was way too long to be played on AM radio, and AM was still where bands got discovered. So Light My Fire was getting lots of FM airplay, but just not getting into the mainstream. So it needed to be edited for AM radio. Here's what Elektra Records owner Jack Holzman had to say.
In exasperation, producer Paul Rothchild said, "Look, if we cut Robby's guitar solo, it will come in at just under 3 minutes." Now, Robby and the band went crazy. But then someone, and I think it was Jim, said, "Look, if a kid in Minneapolis hears even the cut version, they'll be curious about the whole album." And in the late spring of 1967, Light My Fire started climbing the charts, landing at number 1 in mid-July.
So it took 3 months to climb to number 1, and then it stayed there for 3 weeks. Remember, it's 1967, so suddenly the Doors are the soundtrack to the Summer of Love. You know, this band from LA has managed to infiltrate the San Francisco hippie-dominated music scene with this kind of new stripped-down psychedelia and very left-field chord progressions. So the single edit of Light My Fire is just 2 minutes and 50 seconds long, and it moves along quickly in the key of A. Very few people ever notice that the album cut, you know, the full-length version of the very same performance, actually runs 3.5% slower, so it's closer to the key of A flat. No one seems to know how that happened. Now the tracks I have are all from the 4-track master, played at the correct speed, so they're in the key of A, in case you want to play along. All right, let's blow up Light My Fire. The song is credited to the Doors collectively, and each of them definitely made important contributions, but the core of it, you know, the idea, the title, the verse, and the chorus chord progressions and the opening lyrics were all written by the guitarist, Robby Krieger. And amazingly, this was the first song he ever wrote. You know, to me, I guess the baseball equivalent would be like getting pulled up to the majors and hitting a grand slam in your first at bat. You know, how did that happen? Well, the Doors didn't have enough original material for a whole album. So Jim Morrison, who was the poet and the main songwriter to that point, asked all the guys to just take a stab at writing something, anything, to beef up their catalog. So Robby was pretty new to the electric guitar. He'd been a nylon flamenco style player before joining the band. So when he made this first attempt to write a song, he had some really basic goals. Listen to what he said in a recent interview.
I'm going to put every chord I know into this song and see what happens, you know, because most rock and roll songs were like 3 chords at that time, you know. So I came up with that intro part, which uses all the sharps and flats, and because nobody ever used those in rock and roll. So those poor chords, man, nobody ever uses them, you know.
So Light My Fire ended up with all 14 of the chords that Robby knew. He used 7 chords just in the 10-second long bridge that eventually became the intro. So here's how Robby plays it. It's a G bar to D to F bar, and then he plays this cycle of fourths. He goes from F up a fourth to B flat, up a fourth to E flat, up a fourth, down in hand position to A flat, and finally up a half step to A. So look at that again. It's G, D, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, A. Jim had told Robby to just write something that would last more than a year or two, not just something about today, something universal. So Robby had the idea to write about one of the elements. He could have picked earth, water, air, or fire. He picked fire only because he liked the Rolling Stones song Play with Fire. So he works on the song for a few nights, and then he comes to the band with the A minor to F sharp minor chord progression. And he has the lyrics, "You know that I would be untrue, you know that I'd be a liar, if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher, come on baby, light my fire, come on baby, light my fire, try to set the night on fire." So he actually coined the phrase, light my fire. So the other guys start making suggestions. John Densmore says, hey, we could give it a Latin feel, and he comes up with this. Ray Manzarek likes Robby's bridge chords, and he's got some classical training, and he comes up with an almost Bach-like melody over the chords. So the combination of Robby and Ray's personal styles and talents creates this wildly creative and unexpected way to climb from G up to A and build anticipation in the process. And once they establish that A so strongly, it feels like the dominant 5th chord. So most people's ears would expect the next chord to resolve to D as the tonic of a new key. But hey man, not so fast, right? This is the Doors. So they hold that shiny, happy A major chord for 2 bars, only for the verse to stay in A, but now it's A minor. So our ears are going, what? And our minds are kind of blown because suddenly what seemed so happy and promising is actually much more dark and sad. Now, if they'd stayed in A major, we'd expect A major to F sharp minor because it's the relative minor of A, right? But the 1 minor to 6 minor progression, the A minor to F sharp minor, has a much more, blues and jazz feel. Let's look at how Light My Fire was recorded. In 1966, the Doors were the house band at the Whisky-a-Go-Go up on the Sunset Strip. And they'd recorded a demo that was floating around LA and getting rejected by quite a few labels. But Jack Holzman, the owner of Elektra Records, went to see Arthur Lee in Love at the Whiskey one night, and he caught the Doors afterwards. And he really wasn't impressed at first, but after a few nights, they started to click with him. So Jack asked one of his trusted producers, a guy named Paul A. Rothchild, to come and see the Doors. And both Holzman and Rothchild saw enough potential that they decided to sign the Doors with the intent of Rothchild being the producer. So in the summer of '66, they go into Sunset Sound as this really tight live act. And they basically recorded a live album in the studio, minimal overdubs, and they got it done in a week. Everything was recorded on 4-track tape, which was pretty much the studio standard in the mid-'60s. Same format the Beatles used for Sgt. Pepper's across the Atlantic at EMI Studios in London. So here's the track breakdown. John Densmore is playing Ludwig drums, and Ray Manzarek is playing a Fender Rhodes keyboard bass with his left hand. And those 2 parts, the drums and the Rhodes, share 1 mono track. In the final mix, it's panned hard left, but I've just pulled it to the center so you can hear it better. Robby Krieger is playing a 67 SG Special with P90 pickups. It's almost exactly like this one, which is a 68. And he's plugged straight into a Fender twin reverb amp. No pedals, just a little crunch from the tubes when he plays hard enough. So I mentioned Ray's left hand playing the Rhodes bass. His right hand plays a Vox Continental organ. And both the guitar and Vox organ share a single mono track. So think about that for a sec. Here's a song with two legendary extended solos. I mean, it's really like the foundation of psychedelic rock. And both of them are mixed onto a single mono track. In the final mix, they're panned hard right. I mean, so 60s. Jim Morrison's vocals are recorded on their own track, and there's quite a bit of double tracking. So that means he probably recorded a take and then sang along with himself live with the combined vocals being bounced onto a single track. Jim's vocals are pan center.
If I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
So that's 3 tracks, mostly recorded live. We got 1 track left for overdubs, so what's it going to be? Well, Paul Rothchild decides that Ray's keyboard bass is a little mushy. He wants it to have more punch and definition. So he calls in a member of the legendary Wrecking Crew. That's the session band, that played on hundreds of hit songs for the Beach Boys, the Byrds, and tons of other artists. So it's a bass player named Larry Knechtel. And a side note, Larry also played bass on Jose Feliciano's version of Light My Fire. And he played the gospel piano on Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. And he was the bass player for the band Bread. So, super talented guy. Instead of cutting Larry loose to just play whatever bass part he wanted, Rothchild tells him to double Ray's left-hand bass part note for note. He just wants to strengthen and define the bass part that's already there. So Knechtel's bass track is really subtle in the final mix, and it gets panned hard left with the drums and the Rhodes bass. But when you hear it alone and centered, it's crisp and well-defined, and you can even hear Robby playing along on acoustic guitar during the choruses. John Densmore had the idea to start the song with 1 snare hit, immediately followed by Robby and Ray's complex intro, and that perfectly sets up Morrison to croon Robby's lyrics on the first verse.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher.
When we get to the first chorus, Jim is already double-tracked. And something that makes Light My Fire different from a typical pop song is that the chorus is actually pitched lower than the verse. That's really cool for Morrison because he's a baritone, so he gets to show off his low range a little.
Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
So Robby wrote verse 1, and then Jim wrote verse 2, with the lines about wallowing in the mire and their love becoming a funeral pyre. And at first, Robby didn't like that direction, and he said, hey, do we always have to do the death thing? And Jim said, no, man, it'll be perfect. It needs love and death. Now, some critics thought the lyrics were great. Some thought they were really self-indulgent. But hey, it's all part of what makes Light My Fire something dark and doorsy, if that's a word. After the second chorus, just over a minute in, we hit the extended improvs. And all they do is play a simple 2-chord vamp, A minor 7 to B minor 7, over and over for 4.5 minutes. Not your typical pop song. So Ray says they got the idea from John Coltrane's version of My Favorite Things. So, there's a specific jazz influence. So during the solos, Ray's left hand is just kind of on autopilot. He repeats the same bass pattern over 50 times. So that means Larry Knechtel's job is to duplicate that, right? Now, I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing, but it's weirdly hypnotic to hear Knechtel playing the phrase over and over. So Ray solos first for a full 2 minutes. And John suggested that they develop the solo and then, as they come to the end, start to use triplets, 3 against 4, to build the drama. On Jim's isolated vocal track, you can hear him listening and vocalizing with the triplets. And he even says, "come on" and "yeah" before Robby's solo takes over.
Come on. Yeah.
Okay, then Robby solos for the next 2 minutes. So the interesting thing here, there's no crazy acrobatics or shredding on either of these solos, but somehow both of their explorations just never get old to my ear. I particularly like Robby, his little exotic touches, the Middle Eastern moments like this one. So I was pretty young when the Doors album came out. My brother Rick bought it. I liked the whole album, but I really loved Light My Fire. And I got to know the long version and all these solos just note for note. So how do you break out of a hypnotic improvisational journey? In Light My Fire, the breakaway starts around the 5-minute point, and it starts with this simple triplet riff from Robby. And as he gets more insistent about the triplets, Ray's organ joins in, and he also pushes that 3 against 4 tension. And again, if we solo the vocal track, Jim's kind of in a trance at this point, and he can't resist ing along with the triplets. So since Robby and I both have SG specials, I can't resist playing along with him on the end of that solo section, coming back to the turnaround. I'm going to put him in the left channel and I will be in the right. Check it out. So the best way out of the solos was to repeat the intro. And that works out perfectly because it kind of brings everything back down to earth so Jim Morrison can start fanning the flames again during the final verses and choruses. So verse 3 repeats the lyrics of verse 2.
The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose. And our love become a funeral pyre.
And verse 4 repeats verse 1. But here's where Jim alters the melody, right? He sings it up a fifth, and of course it's double track too. The end of each line, the underlying chord is an F sharp minor 7. Listen to how Jim lands on this dissonant flatted 6th at the end of each line. Know that it would be untrue, right there. You know that I would be a liar. Okay, and he pushes the notes just a little sharp.
You know that it will be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher.
Man, I just love that. I mean, I think this is a great lesson for rock singers, especially about what it means to be singing in tune. Sometimes staying on pitch isn't the goal. because your real job is to, deliver the message and the emotion of the song. Singing, just a hair flat and behind the beat will create kind of a relaxed slacker feel. Jack Johnson does that all the time. But pushing the notes a bit sharp and maybe pushing the beat a little can really create excitement. David Bowie in Let's Dance. Bruce Springsteen in Born to Run. I do it sometimes too.
Well, I dreamed I saw the silver spaceships flying.
I think pulling sharp can be a really cool way to add intensity and a little spice, and just show people you really mean what you're singing. If you do it, the key is really not to worry about what people think, that someone's gonna say you don't sing in tune. That's because you actually are in tune. It's just that you're in tune with the emotion instead of a perfect tempered scale. A few episodes ago, I did a 5-part voice training series, and this is one of the key lessons, that a confident singer who lacks accuracy has way more impact than an accurate singer who lacks confidence. Okay, final chorus. I think what Morrison and the band do here is a major reason Light My Fire became such a classic. I think it's definitely why Jim's sexuality scared so many parents of young girls too. So his voice is double tracked the whole time, and he just takes the melody and intensity higher and higher. So he's singing, come on baby, light my fire. Come on baby, light my fire. And then he changes the melody to sing an F. Try to set the night on fire. So it's a blue note over the G. Try to set the night on fire. And it's like the band takes his cue because they switch the chords to an F, C, D pattern then. So it's almost like they're all playing and singing their way into an orgasm. I mean, Jim is a baritone, so he's having to strain to reach these notes, right? I mean, that's a kind of musical friction. And then basically he's stroking the lyric over and over because he's singing the line, try to set the night on fire, over and over, total of 4 times. Baritones usually top out at a G, 2 octaves above middle C, but Jim goes for the peak. He goes for and nails an A, full voice on the word fire, and then he falls off the note. Check this out.
Try to set the night on fire. Try to set the night on fire. Try to set the night on fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Perfect. So then Densmore whacks the snare to re-announce the intro, which is now the outro, and it all ends on that misleadingly happy A major chord. Blowing Up Light My Fire reminded me how the Doors really liberated rock from predictable chord progressions and typical genre labels. They really did open the doors to some new musical dimensions. All right, what are your thoughts and memories of the Doors and Light My Fire? Love it if you'd leave a comment, and remember to pass this video along. Send it to any Doors fans or to anyone who disses the Doors. Thanks so much for being here to blow up the song. These videos are labors of love and respect. It's a lot of work and zero reward other than your comments. So it would mean the world to me if you would support the channel on Patreon. I put exclusive content over there only for patrons, and you'll find my Patreon link in over 100 of my videos over on guitardiscoveries.com. So please check that out. Get your fill of guitar, vocal, and recording inspiration. Keep the music playing, and see you soon.